Welcome back, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Deborah Fitchett. She's been a member of the ANZREG committee since 2018, previously head of the digital access team at Lincoln University, and technical lead implementing Alma and Primo in 2014 and Leganto in 2020. She's now the Associate University Librarian and Copyright Officer. Please join me in welcoming Deborah.
Kia ora, and thank you very much for that introduction, Caroline. Bear with me while I wrangle multiple screens. Hopefully we should now be ready. No ingarangi, no airani, no kotirani o ki tūpuna, I whānau au ki te upoko o te ika Māui, I whānaka eo ki a o tautahi. Kei te mahi au nei ki te whare pūrako o te whare wānaka o āraki. No reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My talk today divides neatly into two halves. Firstly, I'm going to showcase how we've configured Leganto at Lincoln University to automate most of the processes in our reading lists. And in the second half, I'm going to talk about what happened when it all went wrong and how we've been working with Ex Libris to get everything fixed. So Lincoln is a small library in a small university in a small town in a small country. We have about 19 staff, about 16 full-time equivalent, and of course only some of us work with Leganto. So that includes myself. I implemented Leganto when I was in the digital access team. I'm now Associate University Librarian, which limits time for technical work, although I'm also now the Copyright Officer, so it's still very relevant to me. My digital access team, there are two people who cover all of the other learning, teaching and library systems, and so they're now upskilling on Leganto as I hand that over to them as well. Our copyright processor was previously a 0.5 role. It's now technically a full-time role, but it's also got lots of additional responsibilities around APCs and repository support. Our short loans processor is also responsible for interloans, distance loans, back up to the student assistant supervisor and lots of hours on the desk. And our ebook processor is one of two people who manage all of the book and ebook acquisitions and also has desk duties. We've also got colleagues outside the library who support lecturers and students, but don't process any items. About 10 years ago, Lincoln University decided that instead of providing additional resource to the library, lecturers would be responsible for uploading all of their own course readings. The library would only check copyright. But the tool we used back then was really hard for them to use, and they had to type in all of the bibliographic data manually. It very quickly became clear that lecturers didn't have time for any of this, especially because they're often adding a reading to their list half an hour before class. So our priorities implementing Leganto boiled down to make it easy as possible for literally everyone. Everything that could possibly be managed by the system should be managed by the system. We went live at the end of 2020, and these were the key decisions we made. All of our access is via the Moodle LTI integration. We don't use permalinks. We don't use any alternative authentication. That simplifies our systems and it simplifies choices for lecturers. We promote add from search as the first port of call, or the bookmarklet for web items. And manual search or manual data entry is only as a backup. Lecturers do the rollover if and when their course is running, and they publish the list directly. So we don't review the list as a whole. We don't have any staff who has that kind of overview. Originally, we didn't have any integration with the SIS. We later added that basically so it can provide accurate student numbers for copyright reporting purposes. We take full advantage of Leganto's processing rules. At least 90% of readings don't need any library review at all, so it saves us a lot of time. So if it's an uploaded file, as long as it's a single article or a book chapter, or as long as it's within 10% of a book, that's allowed under our license. So we use the copyright approval rules to automatically approve those and mark them as complete. Everything else is dealt with by the automatic citation status rules. Links to electronic articles or websites are set directly to complete. Print books get ready for processing, and our short loan librarian finds those through the ready for processing task list. If the item doesn't have any access options for students, it gets left as being prepared. So that much is probably familiar to a lot of libraries, but the other thing we've done in the Leganto interface is change the labels for each of these statuses to explain to lecturers what each one means in practical terms for them. If it's complete, that means it's visible for the students. Ready for processing means it's hidden while the library checks something. And being prepared means we can't do anything until the lecturer actually uploads a file. There are still some things we have to process manually. For example, if there are books that need to go on short loan or licenses that need to be tweaked for ebooks. Even there, most of the books referred to on reading lists are only supplementary reading. So we're also now using the question and answer feature to prompt the lecturer at the point that they're adding the book. Depending on their answer, some library tags get added and our librarians process the item accordingly. It would be really great if the Q&A feature could also be configured to set item statuses based on the lecturer's response. So that way, when a lecturer says it's just supplementary reading and we don't need to do anything, it could automatically be set as complete. That's currently a feature request, and I'd love it if everyone went and voted for it. I was hoping that I would be able to magically go back into Zoom and paste this link for you. Caroline, if you're able to find the link and paste that into the chat for me, that would be fantastic, because this is not letting me do that right now. But otherwise, I'll paste it in at the end of my talk. As we were preparing to roll out the new user interface last year, we realized that the change in interface moved the copyright clearance form from outside of our lecturers' normal workflow. That meant lecturers were going to forget to fill it out or wouldn't be able to find it, even if they wanted to. And it meant that it wouldn't go through the automatic rules, it wouldn't get added to our normal task list, and therefore there would be delay in students actually getting access to the materials. Some of the changes in the way the new user interface dealt with item statuses also made it harder for us to distinguish between those different task lists. So that was going to throw all of our workflows into chaos. We reached out to the feedback email address and ended up talking with Jessie Ransom, who was absolutely fantastic. Once I explained the challenges that we face here and the processes we use to make everything run smoothly, she grasped exactly what we were trying to do. We talked through some options. She went back to the developers, and they ended up coming up with something that worked even better than it had in the old user interface. So now, as soon as you upload a file, the copyright clearance form pops up immediately, and it gets submitted when the item is saved. It makes it impossible now for lecturers to miss this step. We also got the ability to define a custom status and configure automatic citation statuses so that if the copyright isn't automatically approved, then the new custom status is applied. We display this one to the lecturers as the label hidden pending copyright clearance, so they know our copyright librarian is going to be working on those. We went live with the new user interface in July last year for semester 2, and for a short time, everything was beautiful and glorious. Very soon after, we had so many issues that I've ended up making a chart. I'm not going to go through all of this right now, so don't worry about that, but I thought this gives you a bit of an overview of the timeline and the number of Salesforce jobs we've been logging. I've color-coded the issues here, so red are issues that had a serious impact on us and our users. Orange is for serious issues, but not widespread. Yellow is for user interface issues that don't affect the workflow. The start dates show when we think the issue began rather than when we actually logged that particular case. Last year's issues were mostly around copyright approvals. The first issue was potentially serious for our reporting, but realistically, it was a bit of an edge case, so we weren't too alarmed. But the second issue meant that when lecturers rolled over, a lot of the copyright approvals were getting completely messed up. It didn't affect lists when librarians did the instructor rollover for them. So for our summer semester, we rolled over reading lists manually, and we were really relieved when it was fixed well in advance of semester 1. But when we came back in the new year, we discovered more problems, this time with automatic citation statuses. At first, we logged this as one issue, but as troubleshooting proceeded, it became clear there were actually a whole lot of different issues interlinked. One of the big ones affected any new item with a manually added link, and a different issue affected all items with a full text link via the library, but only when lecturers did rollover. There was another issue that changed the publishing behavior. So we used to have it configured so when a list was published, the item status stayed the same. But now the item statuses were changing, so they were giving lecturers the wrong information because of the way we changed the tables to indicate what the lecturer needs to do. With the user interface issues on top of that, troubleshooting became an absolute nightmare, and yeah, just did my head in. In the meantime, our copyright librarian had to roll over all of the reading lists for semester 1 manually, and she had to fix hundreds of individual citations. It was well above and beyond, I've clicked on the wrong thing, well and above and beyond her normal work. There was a lot of delay getting all of the citations accessible to students. And we were told that the new publishing behavior was by design. So that was pretty terrifying because our workflow really relies on the old behavior. So by the end of March, I was getting extremely unhappy. Obviously, we'd been logging a whole lot of jobs. For each of those jobs, we had done a lot of tests to replicate the issue, to determine the scope of the issue, where it was broken, where it wasn't broken. For most of these issues, I did a screencast demonstrating it, and often I set up a sample reading list with items that demonstrated the issue as well. For a couple of cases, we used the escalation button. At that point, we discovered that the case, when you escalate that way, the case actually stays with the same support person. So at first I was going, well, what's the point of that? But then later we found out that their manager does get a heads up. We also raised some of these issues on the Leganto mailing list. I think because of the way our workflows are pretty unique, and I think every library is a little bit unique with how they use Leganto, and in some ways it was of limited help finding others with the exact same issues, but it was really fantastic for moral support. And I raised that via the ANZREG committee in a meeting that we had with Martin Boucher, and got his attention onto it. So just as a sidebar, after 7 years on the ANZREG committee, I'm now leaving it. So there's going to be a space opening up for a new committee member. I really highly recommend that opportunity to everyone out there. It's a great group of people, an excellent way to keep up with the gossip and get extra moral support from the team. And we have quarterly meetings with an Ex Libris representative, which I absolutely leveraged in this case to get more attention onto our problem. I think some of the progress on the cases may have already been happening behind the scenes, But Martin really kick-started for support and for product management to take a closer look at what was going on in both of those areas. We saw that a newer regression defect was actually fixed between releases instead of having to wait until the next month's release. We got a phone call with the Leganto support where they actually did an analysis of each case with a timeline of exactly what was happening at what point, what went wrong, and what lessons they were learning out of it. So that was a really fantastic call. We also had a great phone call with product management and discussed some of the processes around product development, quality assurance, and troubleshooting. So again, there were some changes that they're making that I think are going to be really productive. And Ex Libris has also agreed to redevelop an additional option for publishing so that we can configure it to let lecturers publish the list without it sending the list to the library and changing the item statuses. That is in progress and tentatively scheduled for August. So we're really looking forward to that. On our side, I'm also doing a lot of documentation work. So firstly is a huge spreadsheet listing every possible citation scenario I can imagine, along with the expected behaviour. It's going to be a reference list for my colleagues to know what's expected in each case. And if we have other issues in the future, it will help us identify exactly what's being affected. If we ever need to do full testing of everything, it will help with that as well. The process of working on that has uncovered some more issues, so I've been logging those as I go. Luckily, so far, they're just edge cases and interface issues, and Ex Libris has been really responsive to those. After that, I'm wanting to write up clearer explanations about what our key design decisions have been. We've got these documented in our implementation documents, but not really for ongoing maintenance purposes. I want to explain what the rationale for each of these design decisions was and the ramifications of each of them. Again, that's going to be helpful for my colleagues, but also if we have another tricky issue like these ones, I'm hoping that it will help explain to Ex Libris what we're trying to do, especially where that's different from what other libraries do. The flowchart on the right is one example of that. I do like a good flowchart. This one gives an overview of what rule sets we use, where librarian input is required, and what output or outcome we expect in the most common scenarios. So I wanted to close with some tips for other libraries, firstly about logging cases. Screencasts in particular are really valuable, especially if it's tricky to explain, or if the support team are telling you that they can't replicate it, and you're starting to feel like you're just imagining things. Now, when you're splitting a case in two, sometimes Ex Libris will ask you to clone the case. I actually suggest don't do that, because when you clone a case, it duplicates the title. That's often inaccurate because when you're cloning a case or splitting it in two, it's usually because there's actually two different things going on. And in any case, it's really confusing for keeping track of your cases if you've got two cases with the same name. When I talked to Shira from Leganto support, she said that they do prioritize fixing regression defects. So if something used to work and is now broken, make sure you emphasize that that's what's happening when you log the case. You can select regression defect from the drop-down menu, explain that it used to work and since the April release it's been broken. Maybe repeat the words regression defect again just to make sure that that's picked up by them. And then Jessie from product management said that she's seen cases where someone speculating on the cause when they logged the job meant that that's where support spent their time looking for the issue. Sometimes that can be counterproductive if the underlying cause turns out to be somewhere else. It's not a complete no-no, but just be aware of the risk if you do that. And if you have to escalate cases, definitely do start by using the escalation button. Even though it keeps it with the same support person, it indicates to them that you are not entirely happy with what's going on so far, and it gets the manager's attention so that they can help out as well. Beyond that, here's another URL, Caroline, if you can paste that into chat. So the official channels are to email the head of the relevant customer support team or the head of the regional team. And unofficially, I do find the mailing lists are really, really useful for getting an idea about whether it's a case that's affecting other people as well. And especially for Leganto, I find that Ex Libris are really active. So often if you post about something on the Leganto list, you'll find that you do get their attention there and get a solution that way. So that's our journey. It's been an adventure. I think we're approaching a happy ending, as long as we don't have a sequel. For now, thank you all very much for listening, and I would love to answer any questions or just hear about your own experiences.
Do we have any questions for Deborah? There is one, but I think it's mostly an open question to all from Catherine. Somewhere along the lines of what's a better way of progressing the case without speculating?
I think the main thing is to be really clear about what you're expecting and what you're seeing that's different from that. So yeah, it's being as clear, as systematic as you can. The screencast Ex Libris says that those are actually really useful if you can do it. If you don't have video capture software, then even screenshots are really useful. So yeah, it's about saying, if you can say these are the types of items it's breaking on, or these are the dates where it stopped working. Any specifics you can give will help them narrow it down. If you really think that you do know what caused it, then you might think it's worth mentioning, but by and large, I think it's just give as many specifics as you can.
Do you have any more questions for Deborah?
I'm seeing some great suggestions for screencast technology. We're really lucky because we have Panopto for our video our lecture captures at Lincoln University, and so I can use that for these as well. Thank you.
Yes, we give everyone a minute or two for any follow-up questions.
Well, I'll always be on the mailing list anyway, and I always enjoy talking about Leganto because it does feel like a bit of a baby for me since I implemented it and have seen it through this far. So yeah, I'll always still be in the community.